Welcome to this edition of Diligent Institute's Inside Today's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about when should boards seek and retain outside experts. And joining me on the show to discuss this is Allan Grafman, who's the CEO with IDW Media Holdings. Welcome, Allan.
Thank you, TK. Great to see you and be with you.
So, interesting topic. It's hard for boards to have directors who are experts on every single issue that might come up in the boardroom. And you're a very experienced director, having sat on many boards. So when boards consider engaging an outside expert, sort of in your experience, how do they go about selecting the right resource? Do they poll their directors? Does management, does the GC help them? How sort of do they go about once they've made the decision of thinking through the process of getting the right expert?
Well, TK, when you say it's hard to have experts for every issue on a board, you're not only 100% correct, but I would say it's impossible. There are so many sets of circumstances that can arise for a board and director. Let me back up and try to answer one of the first things as to when a board should consider engaging outside expertise. I have been on 12 different boards, and I'm speaking as Allan Grafman, speaking just for myself. So my views are shaped by having served on 12 different boards. 4 of those were public boards, 4 of those were private equity boards, and 4 of those were venture capital boards. So the types of companies and the types of boards, in my view, help determine how and when to get outside expertise. So public boards have the highest level of duty and care, and the question as to when and how to get outside expertise is often shaped by the type of board, the type of director, and the type of company. So in my experience, outside expertise is appropriate when the company is facing an unusual, singular, or catastrophic set of circumstances, TK. Those aren't the only circumstances, but I think those are clearly circumstances where a public director's duty and care obligations would require that outside expertise be secured. How to go about getting that? Different directors may have different viewpoints, but I think the overriding viewpoint would be, how would an impartial observer after the fact view the process and the expertise that was drawn upon for the directors? There are instances in the ordinary course of business where it could be optional, but when you have I'll call it a once in a lifetime or once in a company's lifetime, it's a transaction or it's a catastrophe, then there should be, in my view, a considered approach, a funnel of different types of expertise brought to bear, and the selection of the best possible expertise in that circumstance. It might be a little different for private companies, whether they're venture or private equity owned, but certainly one can expect one's decision in this regard to be reviewed and possibly in hostile circumstances.
So I want to make sure that on this next question, we're talking about just public companies, but interesting story. 25 years ago, I had a debate with the then Chancellor of the Delaware Court of Chancery, Bill Allen, who I have a great deal of respect for. And it was around the issue of, if a board doesn't have knowledge on an important discussion topic, to ask the right questions, doesn't it owe it to the shareholders to get outside assistance to make sure they make the right decision? His position was that there's very experienced people typically on the boards, and they always seem to figure it out. And as long as they have quality discussions and they come to a solution that they agree on, they won't be liable for making a poor decision. He didn't feel that it was right for the board to go outside for experts all the time, and sort of felt that they needed to have a process to come together and make good decisions. I'm curious if we had that discussion today, 25 years later, with everything that's happened with cyber and workplace and whatever, whether his answer might be different. But let me ask you, as former chairman of the board of one of your boards, what is your take on prudent due diligence for the board, not just on a complex issue, but on an issue where they might not know the right questions to ask?
So TK, for public boards, I am in total agreement with you that I think your colleague's answer today would be different. In a society where you can be sued for a hot cup of coffee, I certainly believe that not just duty and care, but being able to justify a decision. You could reach, a director and a board can reach the right answer, maybe all the time, but it might be an expensive journey to justify it. If we look around our society, I'm of the opinion that certainly ordinary course of action transactions, that's management's responsibility with a proper level of oversight by the board. For instances at the other end of the continuum that are singular, one-off, catastrophes, where the company's future is gravely at risk, in my view, there's not a rush for expertise, but if you don't get outside expertise, you will want to be able to document why, and you will be able to justify why. I mean, imagine maybe there are certain circumstances. So, for instance, on crypto, if you have the former chair of the NSA, the National Security Agency, his opinion would count for probably a decisive factor. If he were to say to the board, I got this, I know who to call, I think you still would want to have a variety of resources so you are not showing partiality to a fellow board member. It's hard for me to conceive in extreme circumstances where you would not want outside expertise.
Well, let's twist this just a little bit, this issue. And there are many boards that have totally, and I mean totally, trusted management that have paid sort of a serious price, not only in terms of their own reputation, but probably more importantly, experiencing a devastating event which impacted the company value sort of by accepting the word of management on a topic that I suspect they didn't understand. Okay, you'd have to believe that that was the case. There are plenty of examples where lack of prudent knowledge, sort of had catastrophic results. Enron, WorldCom, HealthSouth. I'm sure we could go on, and those directors' reputations were sorely, soiled by their lack of sort of digging in or asking the questions, or possibly their ignorance on the particular topic that was being discussed. So isn't it prudent at times to, even in those situations where there's nobody to ask the right questions and you maybe not have the total trust in management, that you should go outside and make sure that you get somebody who can ask the right questions?
So TK, I'm delighted you've asked this question. It's one of my hot buttons, in that in 2010, I advocated for a position that at the time was viewed to be very aggressive, and I think now would not be viewed. And the instance was the BP, British Petroleum, Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And at that time, I said, it is not appropriate for just management to be addressing this issue. There should be a director at the side of the CEO, one, to indicate we, the board, are watching this very carefully. The CEO is responsible for fixing it. And we, the board, are advising and getting outside expertise to assist us, the board, and management. So in my view, board participation, support, and oversight in those types of situations that you just enumerated, TK, is really important. And it should be visible, and it should also be active. It should clearly focus on having the CEO fix the problem, but there should be no doubt that the board and directors are actively engaged in supporting management and fulfilling their duty of care and loyalty to the company.
Yeah, and I think we better make it clear here, and particularly from your position as the CEO, we're not saying that the board should be involved in, sitting on the CEO's shoulder and helping with day-to-day, operations. This is about issues that, as you said in the very beginning, are very important, and the board lacks the expertise possibly to ask the right questions and on a very important topic.
Well, clearly, TK, thank you for drawing that out, because I'm attempting to be absolutely 100% clear. Ordinary course of business, actions, transactions, the board's role is a proper oversight and not fulfilling executive functions. And speaking just as a director, a former director, and having served on boards, it's really important that it's understood that the example that I gave was an extraordinary, in that instance, catastrophic set of circumstances. That is, those are singular and exceptional, where the company's entire future is in their hands. And that happens more often it certainly happens more often now than it did 25 years ago.
Yeah. Well, Allan, I really want to thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to join us and talk about this sort of interesting topic that's certainly important to the board in certain situations. But thanks for joining us.
Thank you, TK. Always great to see and be with you.
And that will conclude this episode of Diligent Institute's Inside Today's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.